Well, first of all, David, thank you for that gracious introduction. And thank you and Hyundai for opening up this beautiful, beautiful facility. I mean, we could not have a better place to gather and to be charged with thinking about the future. The glass allows us to look beyond what is obvious within the walls. The skies give us the opportunity to look beyond what is oftentimes viewed as the concrete, asphalt, and steel of transportation at the surface level. So clearly this is an occasion for us to test our vision, to test our dare, and our vision for the future. Just a few weeks ago, there was a very important meeting here in Washington, D.C., and it involved the President and the Democratic leaders of the House and Senate. And the discussion was about the future. It was about leaving the bounds of Earth to envision a greater opportunity for infrastructure investment going forward. And the President said to the effect that I like this figure that you've been talking about, $2 trillion. And the Speaker said, we've got to do this and we've got to do it together. And in order to do it together, to justify our coming together, it's got to be something that's big and bold. And I think today we'll hear about what can be done with resources that are brought to bear because of a big and bold vision, resources that would be in the neighborhood of $2 trillion. Let me also say, David, that we thank you for the wonderful leadership that you've provided here in Washington, D.C. and other parts of the globe for Hyundai, but we also acknowledge the opportunity that you're going to have here as you venture to California to actually head their transportation department, and I think that deserves clearly a round of applause. Let me also say that I'm very, very pleased to introduce our next speaker. This is an individual who has really grown up in many respects understanding the important work of the House. I had the good fortune of working with his father, who was chair of the T&I committee, and here now the son, former chair of the T&I committee, Bill Schuster. Chairman Schuster has recently joined Squire Patton Boggs. We are elated to have him as a part of our team, and we look forward to working with him to make, again, this dream of a transportation infrastructure package reality. I'm sure that it's going to include many of the things that he actually proposed in the initiatives that he put forward as chair. And we look forward to that. And I'm also pleased to announce that with his joining the firm, we have established a new global infrastructure group that he and I will have the pleasure of co-chairing. And I'm looking forward to the opportunity that that will afford us to work together. So let me now bring on a true visionary, one who knows about the importance of transportation, but also knows about the importance of a gathering like this with leaders like all of those here gathered. Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you very much, Secretary Slater. When I went to Squire Patton Boggs, the first thing some of the leadership at Squire Patton Boggs said was, you never want to follow Rodney Slater to the podium. It's like following Babe Ruth. So this is a daunting challenge to follow him, but I'm really proud to be working with him at Squire Patton Boggs, as he just said, talking about our initiative for the Global Infrastructure Industry Group. Looking forward to working with him and bringing all the assets to bear that Squire Patton Boggs has around the world when it comes to infrastructure, from the beginning of the projects to the end of the projects. We can help in all phases. So again, I'm really proud to be there and be part of all that. And I'm proud to be part of Infrastructure Week. Thank you all for coming together. I think this is really important. I was with some folks at the Business Roundtable on Monday night, I guess, and they said when they first started out there were 23 or 26 groups involved, and now there are over 500. So this has really grown, and it's incredibly important that it has grown. As I tell people, we had some pretty good success on the Transportation Infrastructure Committee, but the reason we had success was because the stakeholders were part of the process. We're helping educate members, we're helping us push bills through, and garner that support. So again, it's incredibly important. And to talk about educating members, I was in a roundtable and ask, why members of Congress aren't engaged in transportation infrastructure as much as they should be. And the bottom line is it's really busy up on Capitol Hill. And you sort of tend to be in your committees, and that's where you learn the most and spend most of your time. So it's important that folks like you get out to Capitol Hill, sit down with your members of Congress, those that are not on the T&I committee. They're the ones that really need help and getting information from you and guidance. So I'd urge you to make sure that you continue to do that. It's great to be here talking about the things we're talking about, autonomous vehicles. First, I got to tell you, it doesn't say in my bio, I used to be an automobile dealer. And people often say to me, what was your favorite car? And I'd always say, the car that I could see its taillights that we just sold going off the lot. So that truly, it is my favorite car. But my experience with autonomous vehicles, I'm not technologically that advanced, but I got to first of all see the autonomous vehicle in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Carnegie Mellon, General Motors, and I think Google were involved in that. They won the DARPA contest that had the first autonomous vehicle. And so I showed up at Carnegie Mellon, and they had a Chevy Blazer, which for those of you younger people, that's a medium-sized sport utility. You couldn't get anybody in the vehicle. It was packed with technology, from front to rear, from the floor to the ceiling. They had bubble on top with sensors. They had antennas and sensors on the door. I mean, it was definitely a Chevy Blazer, but you couldn't use it. 7 years after, that was about 3 or 4 years ago, I went back to Pittsburgh and got into the Carnegie Mellon vehicle, which was a small Cadillac SUV. And as a car dealer, you do the walk around, and I'm looking for, okay, what's the weak spot in this thing? Because there's no technology. It's going to fit 4 people. I mean, it wasn't packed with technology. So they opened up the trunk, and there was the brain. It was about this big. And it was sitting in the place where the spare tire goes. And I looked at him, I said, this is a weakness. You got to have a spare tire in a car. What if it goes flat? And he looked at me and said, well, Congressman, this car has run flat tires. We don't need a spare tire. So again, going from seeing it at the beginning to actually riding it, going 35 miles, truly amazing what's happening with technology and transportation. And so I'm very excited about the future and technology and how we can utilize it to make our transportation system more safer, make it more efficient, which is going to benefit all of Americans. And just finally, and I'll talk about it later, about the President and the Congress coming together, or the Democratic leaders of 3 weeks ago, I guess it was, approximately 3 weeks ago, and they came out, and it's the first time I've seen the Democrats have a meeting with the President come out and be positive. So again, that's a good start. As Rodney said, $2 trillion is big, bold. That's what we need. And as I said, I'll talk about it more later. But it's really a pleasure to be here. Thanks to Hyundai for hosting us, and I look forward to the discussion today. Thank you very much.
Okay, very good. Well, we just got word that Ranking Member Graves is not going to be able to make it because of the floor vote. So,
well, and they're having the hearing at T&I on the 737 MAX.
Very good. We were trying to squeeze him between all of that, but we've gotten that word. So we will proceed with the program. But why don't we do this first? We've got a panel, and they're definitely going to get into some of the things that both David mentioned and that the chairman mentioned. But why don't we grab lunch first, and then if you hurry back to your seats, we'll then kick off things with the introduction of the moderator and then the panel. Is that okay? Okay, very good. So we'll take just a quick break here for that. Okay, very good, very good. Now, all of you should know how committed our panelists are because you're getting a chance to have lunch. They're not. But but they know that they have to work for their lunch, and so yes. So we thank them for that. But as we get ready for the panel, first of all, you'll notice that we have a photographer moving around. You should know that we'd like to take a number of photographs and maybe use them for marketing purposes. We can share those with you as well. But unless you have an issue with that, we would just like for you to know it and have your consent that we continue to do that. So we very much appreciate it. What I'd like to do now is bring on our moderator, Robert Kelly. Bob heads our communications practice. He has more than 30-plus years in this space. He is a true visionary. He has worked for many, many years on intelligent transportation systems. He's a columnist with Thinking Highways. And he's a very, very special partner at Squire Patton Boggs. He will lead a fantastic discussion. And I want you to know that Dean and I were actually having a side conversation about the criticality of the discussion, and we also talked about the timing, because this is a very, very competitive area. And the U.S. Is challenged for leadership on this front, but the leadership is clearly coming from the U.S. as well. One company in particular I mentioned as a partner of Qualcomm is Verizon. I'm actually on the board of Verizon. And Verizon takes a lot of pride in bringing us 3G first, 4G first, and now 5G first. But there are others that are really aggressive in trying to do this because they know that the speed and accuracy of this capability is what makes it all possible. And it really goes beyond transportation and beyond autonomous vehicles to include literally everything. Everything. So whatever your business, whatever your needs and uses are, the discussion that we're about to have will likely impact it in some way. And so without additional delay, let me just call forth a very capable and distinguished partner at Squire Patton Boggs, Robert Kelly.
Thanks, Mr. Secretary. You really raised the stakes for us there. First, I'd like to thank Hyundai for hosting us today. It's a beautiful office and much appreciated. Also, thanks to our co-sponsor, ITS America. You'll hear from Shaylin in just a bit. And it's an organization I've been involved with for almost 30 years, which is shocking when you consider they've only been around 28. But there you have it. Our conversation today is entitled A Conversation on Converging Infrastructure. And it's not about one area, it's about really all areas that will come into this. And we have very distinguished panelists that I'll bring up here who represent not only the telecom side of things, the transportation side, also the energy side. And we're certainly looking forward to hearing from them. So I'm going to go ahead and just ask them to come on up and join us. I'm not going to read their bios. You can see those in the program. But the panelists are Shaylin Batt, who is the President and CEO of ITS America, Dean Brenner, Senior Vice President of Spectrum Strategy and Technology Policy for Qualcomm, Mary Brown, Senior Director, Technology and Spectrum Policy for Cisco, Matteo Muratori, an engineer for Integrated Transportation Energy Systems, the National Energy Renewal Laboratory, and Cordell Schachter, Chief Technology Officer for New York City Department of Transportation. It's a very distinguished panel. I thank them all for joining us today. And what we're going to do is we're going to ask each of them to have a few opening remarks, and then we will get into some discussion, and then we will take certainly your questions as well. So please, thank you for coming as well, and happy Infrastructure Week. Mary, do you want to?
Okay. It's on. Hi, I'm Mary Brown from Cisco Systems. If you don't know Cisco Systems, we are a San Jose-based internet solutions company with global reach. In coming to this event today, I just wanted to set the framework for how Cisco thinks about infrastructure in this space. We cast a pretty broad view. We see this as part of our Digital Cities initiative. Cisco has estimated that through 2024, cities around the world could realize $2.4 trillion of value by digitizing their processes, including physical networks like transportation. And they would do that through enhancing their tax base, their fee base, creating productivity gains, budget savings from digitizing things like streetlights, improvements in parking, et cetera, et cetera. And part of our Digital Cities offer includes something called connected transportation, connected roadways, which is broader than just radio. It addresses the needs of highway authorities, both here in the United States and around the world, who are looking to take this physical network, the transportation network, and digitize it and pull the information, pull the data out of it so that it can run better. So they can help eliminate traffic congestion, they can maintain those roadways better, et cetera. So we have a much broader view, I think, than many companies do in this space, and I'm really looking forward to the panel today. Thanks.
Thank you, Mary. So good afternoon. My name is Shailen Bhatt, and I'm the CEO and President of ITS America. And for those of you who may not know, ITS America was started 30 years ago with the idea that computers and communication technology could improve transportation. And it's still true today, but instead of Pentiums and dial-up modems, we have 5G, and we have supercomputers and predictive analytics and all of these new technology items. But the technology is cool. But why are we doing this? And we talk about converging infrastructure, and Secretary Slater mentioned that the U.S. is falling behind, or has the potential to fall behind in this space. I was in we do Infrastructure Week pretty often, and I've been in this space for a while, and every year we talk about crumbling roads and bridges that are in danger of falling down, and it's become a bit of a running joke. I was in Dubai about a month ago, and the person who opened up the conference I was speaking at didn't talk about crumbling roads in Dubai. He talked about how Dubai roads have been voted best in the world 6 years ago. And I fly in a lot of airports. And if you look at some of the airports, when I was in Colorado, Denver International is the newest airport in the United States, opened in 1995. And if you fly to some of these airports in the world, infrastructure is a place where you don't come to the U.S. now to find the latest and the greatest. And the same is true on the technology side. We have been leading, but now other countries are starting to build on what we started a few years ago. And so we need to make sure that as we look at this future, and our vision is for a better world transformed by intelligent mobility, one that is safer, greener, and smarter. And I know that Matteo may talk about some of the greening of the fleet and electrification, and we talk about operating the system more effectively. I'll just end by saying this. When I became the director of the Colorado DOT, in 2014, there were 484 fatalities. When I left 3 years later, we were over 714. And so it's 10% year-over-year increase. It wasn't just in Colorado, it was across the nation. And we've engineered a lot of safety into the vehicles. So the vehicles today have crumple zones and automatic emergency braking, and there's lots of safety in the vehicle. We've engineered a lot of safety into the roadways. We have clear zones, and the highway is the same from New York to Los Angeles. The next frontier of being able to reduce fatalities on our system is to have the technology and the safety converge and get the vehicles talking to each other, the vehicles talking to the infrastructure, and that's going to be our main focus of the fight over the next couple of years. So that's what I will be talking about today. Thank you.
Hi, thanks very much. I'm Dean Brenner from Qualcomm. Fight Washington, D.C., a fight? That sounds shocking. I'm very happy to be here today with so many colleagues and friends, including one of my longest friends in all of Washington, D.C., Paul Bozzozzi, who's a great telecom lawyer here at Squire Patton Boggs. For those of you who don't know about Qualcomm, Qualcomm is the world's leading developer of 2G, 3G, 4G, and now 5G. And we develop all kinds of wireless technologies, and we really work with a great sense of urgency to get those technologies out into the market. So I always like to say, if you see a Qualcomm employee who's not running and who's only walking, let me know about that, because we really, speed to market is the whole game to our approach at Qualcomm. In addition to developing these technologies, we're very involved in the commercialization. Most notably, we're the world's largest manufacturer of chips for wireless devices. So that started with cell phones, now smartphones, tablets, computers, and then eventually that found its way into cars. So from Qualcomm's point of view, a car is really just a smartphone on wheels. So we've been involved in technologies for cars since, to my recollection, at least since 2013. We're very excited about the newest technology, which is starting out in 4G and has a smooth path into 5G, which we call cellular V2X, cellular vehicle to everything. And this technology enables all the things that Shailin just talked about, using the same cellular technology that all of us rely upon today, and that is undergoing constant innovation, constant R&D engine. So I'm very happy to be here and look forward to talking more about how to enable this technology.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Matteo Muratori. I'm with the National Renewable Energy Lab, or NREL. For those of you who haven't heard of us, NREL is one of 17 national labs of the Department of Energy complex, and we focus on a lot of renewable energy and efficiency. And my group, particularly the transportation group, focusing on assessing the potential for energy diversification. And we study several different fuels and pathways that we can leverage to move people and goods around, ranging from natural gas to advanced petroleum engines to biofuels, hydrogen, electrification, and on the related infrastructure that comes with that. Today I would really like to bring in the energy perspective to this discussion. So in the United States, over 90% of the energy that we use in transportation comes from one single fuel, and that's petroleum. We have been dependent, relying on petroleum for a very long time. However, we are seeing this picture rapidly changing. We have today over 1 million electric vehicles on the road in the United States, 6 million globally. We have 6,000 fuel cell vehicles on the road, all in California for now, but that's also changing fairly rapidly. And so I'd like to reflect a little bit on what are the infrastructure implications of this transformation. As we transition from petroleum to alternative fuels, there are a lot of implications from an infrastructure perspective. And two that I would like to bring up today are the refueling and recharging network. If we want to rely on alternative fuels, we need people to be able to charge and refuel their vehicles a lot more easily than they can do today. Even when we think about electric vehicles, while the majority of charging today happens at home, we know that if we really want to push that 1 million electric vehicles farther down the line, we need to provide a network of reliable charging stations and multi-unit dwellings at apartment complexes, at workplaces, a network of DC fast charging stations that can allow for long-distance travel. And so those implications really cut across a lot of different stakeholders, and I'd like to bring that up today. And the other implication is the synergies with the electric grid and how we charge electric vehicles, where we charge them, the timing of charging. Is really important to understand how these vehicles are going to impact the electricity system. You know, a dumb charging or not optimized charging can lead to significant impacts on distribution networks and on electricity system that might require expensive investment. But on the other hand, smart charging really opens up for opportunities to optimize transportation and energy system at the same time, provide cheaper electricity for everyone, and affordable transportation for Americans. So really like to discuss these two perspectives today in the panel. And thank you for having me.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cordell Schachter. I'm the Chief Technology Officer and CIO at New York City's Department of Transportation. At our agency, under Mayor Bill de Blasio's leadership, we're focused on Vision Zero, and that's eliminating traffic fatalities and serious injuries. And under Commissioner Polly Trottenberg's leadership over the last 6 years, we've continued to drive down the number of fatalities in New York City. Until this year, we were bucking the national trend where injuries and fatalities were still increasing. And we do that with three main strategies. One, engineering. We are actually changing the physical geometry of our roads to make them safer. Two, education. We're out in the community informing groups, the young and the old and everybody in between, what they need to do to keep themselves and other people on the road safe. And three, enforcement, and working together with local law enforcement. We enforce the laws that we have, and we lowered the speed limit, achieving safety benefit. One of the newest programs that we're working on is Connected Vehicle in partnership with US DOT. And our Connected Vehicle pilot will go live this year using DSRC, connecting to eventually about 8,000 vehicles of all type in New York City in 3 different neighborhoods. Downtown Manhattan, the FDR Drive, and downtown Brooklyn. And we hope to show, we expect to show, that with vehicles talking to each other and the infrastructure, we can additionally save lives and give people more situational awareness as they're driving their vehicles. Perhaps setting the stage for emerging technologies like emergency braking. We believe that this technology will be so useful and will save so many lives that we're looking forward to rolling it out across the city. And we're not doing that alone. We have many business partners, including US DOT, that are creating an ecosystem really from scratch. And we require automakers, device makers, security experts, in order to make a technology like this not only work, but work in New York City, where our test scale is probably production scale for most places in the country. And we have additional challenges around personal privacy, around cybersecurity that we need to solve. And we understand that hopefully the government and the public are ready to act on these things and to be active participants in keeping our infrastructure and their own personal information safe. So while we do that, we expect to be able to manage the roads of New York City much better. But when we compare ourselves to some of the places around the world, one difference for some of those places with gleaming infrastructure is we're an open society. They may not be. And governing and leading in an open society is going to be messy. It's not necessarily efficient, but I think, I'm going to speak for everybody in the room, we probably wouldn't have it any other way. And we're going to need to debate these issues between the private and public sectors, the research institutions, to determine what is the doable path forward. And I think where we have opportunities led by the federal government, the state government, city governments like New York City, will have the opportunity to show what's possible that we then can challenge each other to even do better.
Some other aspect when we think about, transportation in the United States, from an energy perspective, over 60% is light-duty vehicles that are personally owned by people to drive around. And we are seeing significant hurdles and challenging in adopting a new technology that's different. And one of the aspects that I think is important is really teaming up with the automakers, the original manufacturer, and combine that with education to show what the advantages of these technologies are to the public at large. Sometimes it's not just evident. I'm transitioning to an electric car, and people are not familiar with what that technology does or what it means, or can it take me where I need to go? Is it reliable? Is it safe? Can it catch on fire or not? So sort of addressing those issues, and the reason why I brought up the manufacturer is making sure that consumers have the vehicles that they like. A lot of what goes into the decision of adopting a vehicle is personal preference. I like a large pickup truck because I feel safe and I like driving above everyone else, and I want to be able to tow a significant load when I want to. And so we need to make sure that these new technologies align with what people are used to and what they like and what they prefer.
So just sticking with the radio technology questions that are facing this community, I think the first question is, to what degree do we think solving issues around safety and safety of life is important? Sort of one question. And the second question is, and this was raised yesterday, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more from the Federal Communications Commission, to what extent do we think we need specific spectrum to do that? And I would have thought a couple years ago we would have had consensus. I would have told you we had consensus on those two questions a few years ago, that safety is very important and we need dedicated spectrum to do it. I'm not so sure we have consensus today, and I think we have to go back to revisit those questions and make sure we're all in agreement before we move forward.
And I would take that one step forward, Mary. I would just say that I think it is. I was in Vegas on Monday for their infrastructure event. So Vegas is all about the odds, right? Lots of people go to Vegas and they gamble. And it was in the New York Times about a year ago. It said that you have a 1 in 103 chance of dying in a car crash in the United States. I'm not sure there are many games of chance in Las Vegas that give you those kind of odds of winning. And this idea that we're going to kill 38,000 people a year and just keep doing it in perpetuity while we figure out, some stuff, and do we move forward on this? Do we not? I just think it is completely unacceptable. There is a V2X technology. There are V2X technologies that are out there that we know will move the needle on this. And what we need in terms of your wish list is regulatory certainty and just the will to say we're going to go and do this. If we can say we're going to put somebody on the moon, if we're going to say that we can go and do big things, this is something that we can do. And it's really baffling as to why this isn't like just kind of common sense. I get there's potentially billions of dollars involved, but if you look at the cost of the 38,000 fatalities to the American economy every year, it would seem to be that there would be a cost-benefit ratio that could be calculated that said that this made sense.
So from Qualcomm's point of view, better? Okay, yeah. From Qualcomm's point of view, as I said, we've been working on V2V, V2X technology since at least 2013, to my recollection. And in 2013, when I came along, Qualcomm came along with certain ideas, we were told, no, you don't understand, you're way too late. This DSRC thing, the rules for it were adopted in 1999. Who the heck are you to come along in 2013 with a better idea? No, you're way too late. Okay, so now let's fast forward. Here we are in 2019. This DSRC thing hasn't rolled out. There aren't There's no one selling new cars with DSRC in it. And so what we did at Qualcomm, instead of doing nothing, because I'm with you, Shailen, we should get the technology rolled out, we invented a technology that's better. Now, we're not stupid. We wouldn't invent a second technology if the first technology couldn't be exceeded. We only invent new technologies if there's an improvement, not a little improvement, not a moderate improvement, a big enough improvement, because by the way, when I say we invented a new technology, that means we spent a lot of money to invent the new technology, and we don't allocate our capital unless we think that there's going to be acceptance, that the technology is going to actually be rolled out. So, in my wish list is that this technology, which we've shown in testing all over the place, we're happy to continue doing that. We're doing all kinds of testing. We filed the results of the testing at the FCC, at DOT with NHTSA. But the little problem is that there were rules adopted in 1999 in the United States when, in good faith, no one could have foreseen that this technology would come along. In 1999, the DSRC technology, it's based on the most primitive form of Wi-Fi, right? So we've done a lot in the telecom space since then in Wi-Fi, and then in cellular, 3G, 4G, and now 5G, but the rules are still 1999 rules. So the way I'll sum this up is it is inevitable that there would be something from the FCC to say, hey, we first looked at this in 2013 when there was an FCC proceeding. It's 6 years later. Nothing has happened. We should look at this again because something's not working here. It's not happening. And they're obviously aware that there is a new technology that, as I say, is the only one that there's a car maker who wants to sell cars with. So, my wish list is the technology that is indisputably better, that there's a car maker who wants to roll out, they should be able to roll it out.
Yeah, I agree with you. I would just say I think GM does have some vehicles that are out there, and they're, so I don't want to just, as GM's a member, so I don't want to let that one go. You mentioned testing. I would say the other thing that I think is incredibly important, and Bob, you've talked about this a lot, is if people are going to open up the spectrum, as some folks want to, then it's really important that they finish the testing to make sure that unlicensed devices don't interfere with the V2X technologies that are in that space. I think that's something else that would be a big wish.
And by the way, I love GM. They're part of 5GAA. They're working on CV2X as well.
So why can't we just snap our fingers and give Dean his wish? It's a little complicated, right? Because things have happened in this space. The transportation industry spent a lot of time developing DSRC, teasing it out of basically nothing and teasing the ecosystem out of nothing and figuring out what the standards were going to be at all layers of the stack and figuring out what the use cases were going to be and how they were going to divide up the spectrum. And as we sit here today, we have many customers in the band, roadway authorities all over the country that have installed DSRC radios, and they are finding that having, while having a fleet of privately owned vehicles on a V2V or V2X system would be helpful, simply by outfitting their Department of Public Works fleets, by outfitting their taxi fleets, they can glean a heck of a lot of information about what's happening on the physical transportation network. They don't need a massive rollout of V2V in order to be successful. So that creates a problem because that's a problem of incumbency. It's a problem because we're using now public dollars to invest in a system that that may or may not survive the coming public policy debate that's about to happen over at the Federal Communications Commission. The only thing we know as we sit here today is the two technologies cannot transmit in the same frequencies at the same time because they can't hear each other. So to have them operating together would make them both deaf, in effect. So that's the dilemma, I think, and the dilemma why Dean can't have his wish granted today.
No, actually, I can. Wait, let me just finish, though. But I can. Because, by the way, my proposal, the 5GAA proposal, it's not my proposal, it doesn't obliterate DSRC. It doesn't prohibit DSRC. Just the opposite. Step one of the proposal is 20 of the 75 megahertz to enable the technology that I want to see rolled out, but 50 is left alone and would continue to be used for DSRC. And then that's a short-term proposal. And then we do have a longer-term proposal, but even that, because then the 5G version of C-V2X, which was just approved in the standards process last month and which will be finalized by the end of the year, maybe the beginning of next year, that requires more spectrum. And even the proposal to enable that technology still enables DSRC on the channel that GM uses in their cars. So I'm not trying to prohibit, banish, force a decision between the two technologies. The way we've done well in the United States is by allowing technology choice. All I'm saying is it's inevitable that there would be a rethinking of what to do about this spectrum, because there have been game changers. One game changer is this new technology I've talked about. Second game changer is 5G. Third game changer would be that there's another swath of spectrum 30 times the size of the spectrum at issue here, which is the 6 gigahertz band, 30 times more spectrum, which is a great new band for Wi-Fi and other unlicensed technologies, and that Mary and I are both working on. So with that, I'll just stop.
So,
Cordell, you have the
So
line.
Matteo, Cordell, we'll come to you in a second.
Do you mind?
No, go ahead.
So I think we need to be careful about what we're saying is better or best, because that may be in the eye of the beholder or the marketer. I think one thing that's clear across these range of technologies, and the reason why we don't have widespread DSRC adoption, why we didn't have good, and in some cases still don't have good 4G coverage throughout the country, is because the models that we've used and the government's hesitancy to invest and either make a marketplace or create rules that would ensure access across the country have in some sense failed us. And we're talking about rolling out yet another generation of technology without government coordination, potentially pushed into cities and other areas, without guaranteeing that everybody will have access to that technology, while we still have an environment where 4G and other high-speed internet isn't available to anyone. And even in New York City, we're still fighting the battle with our telcos and cable companies to provide broadband access in the homes of people with low income. So these aren't easy things. And unlike other places in the world where the government mandated coverage, mandated the placement of cell antennas, of harmonized technology. We've been reluctant to do that here, to let the private sector go. And to roll back the time machine 20 or 30 years, these aren't the models that the government used to invent the internet. So the biggest economic and social game changer of many a generation was created by the government in the Department of Defense, which has the funding for it, but was then given over to the National Science Foundation, and ensured that that was going to be available across the country. So that I think we have a good example of a government regulated and designed network that permitted both access and economic development. But yet, instead of following that, we continue to stumble and not invest and not create the rules that are necessary to bring these other technologies to prime time.
The third word, cybersecurity. That's often been cited as a very major concern for the rollout of connected vehicles and autonomous vehicles, certainly. And I guess I'm wondering whether there's a view here among the panelists as to whether it's being given too much attention. Is this something we're worrying about too much? Is that possible? Or are there solutions that are being worked on What's your level of confidence in this?
So I think in this environment, it's impossible to worry too much about both things since we're actually doing so little. And if we take from Mary's comment initially, if we really commit ourselves to a safety culture and all parties agree to measure themselves against whether they are furthering a safety culture or moving farther away from a safety culture, you see it applies not only to our personal safety on the roads, but the safety of our information and really the safety of our infrastructure. That the country has not made the kind of investments. The government has not required companies to make their technology more resilient. And frankly, using a term that I really don't like from the IT community, user-proof. You know, two communities use user for their customers, right? IT and drug dealers. So we're not exactly in good company when we say that. But there's too many excuses about us using poor passwords or not having a password, rejecting it. We need to get beyond that. And the companies that now dominate the economy in a variety of areas have ways of improving the safety of our information. Those lessons need to be brought over to transportation safety. All of transportation is becoming an IT system. And the IT skills that before were centered in the office that was responsible for email or responsible for sharing files are now going to be responsible for communicating from the roadways, communicating traffic conditions, coordinating traffic management, one day from the cloud securely when we work out the communications. But all of that has to be done on a foundation of guaranteeing user privacy, that our information is not monetized by a company unless they ask our permission and perhaps have to share that added value that they're getting, that our elections are secure, that the government continues to invest and follow up on legislation that's been proposed there. We lose that, we lose everything. That cybersecurity is throughout the environment, whether it's when we're shopping, driving, taking an airplane, riding in a plane, mass transit. There's so many opportunities. And finally, whatever communication technologies we roll out, so this is going to be an area that, Dean, you and I can agree on, needs to be ubiquitous throughout the country. And we all, as Americans, have to be willing to make the investments so we all can benefit from that ubiquitous technology, communications technology.
So yeah, I completely agree with everything. Oops, I'm not on. Here we go. Now I'm working. Okay. I completely agree with Cordell on the culture of security issue. And I think the good news is, Bob, I think in 2019 we're a lot further along the development of that culture than we were 5 or 10 years ago. I would point to a couple developments in particular. The NIST cybersecurity framework has been tremendously helpful in terms of creating a process by which critical infrastructure industries can secure, take the steps to secure their networks from cyber attack. And that continues to be developed and refined by NIST. It's a living, breathing document. And I think the transportation industry can learn from that. I mean, that's sitting there. There's a lot of private sector industries that are learning from that, that document. We have an auto ISAC for information sharing. That's great. Okay, we've started down that road. There probably needs to be more information sharing inside the transportation industry. Inside of the technology sector, we've been doing that for years, right? Technology and communications have been doing that for years. But the real issue for the transportation sector, from my perspective, is you have many agencies, big and little, of various degrees of sophistication that are going to be procuring things. And in that procurement, they need to be able to understand what their vendors are actually delivering. And I think that's the challenge, is educating. The sophisticated departments like New York City are going to have a completely different take on that than a procurement officer maybe in a smaller transportation agency. But they have to understand what their vendors are delivering and how their vendors are going to keep those networks secure, whether it's radio, whether it's the IT network sitting behind the radios, whatever it is.
Thank you. Matteo, can you talk a little bit about the integration of the power industry and the electric industry with the electronic vehicles, and how that's going to integrate with the power infrastructure, and how connected vehicles will affect all of that?
Yeah, I think that's a good example of silos that are being broken down. You know, the electric industry and the transportation industry really never had much to do with one another until very recently. And so, I mean, maybe aligning a little bit with the theme of the conversation here, you know, there is a communication layer that is important, and we need to make sure that an industry, and believe it or not, the electric power industry is still not digitalized. So just the flow of information within that single industry is already complicated. Getting real-time information to your meter in your home is still very much a hurdle and a challenge. And so add to that to that complexity the dimension of adding new technology, which is an electric vehicle that now not only needs to get information from the power grid and send information back, but it also moves, which is a lot more complicated than a stationary meter at your home. And I think that there are great opportunities there to sort of develop new technologies and improve the synergies between the two. One comment that I wanted to make, I think I glanced over it at the very beginning. Today, roughly 0.2% of our electricity goes to transportation. Those are, you know, the light rails, the metro in DC, New York. Transportation is essentially irrelevant for the power industry. It's minuscule. When we look at aggressive scenario of electrification, we are talking about a quarter of the total electricity production going into transportation. So this is really a game changer for the power industry. And it could really, I can see a clear bifurcation. If we do it in a smart way, this will really allow facilitating integration of renewables in the grid, having cheaper electricity for everyone, having a more resilient and reliable system, including aspects like cybersecurity. But we could also do it the wrong way, where without communication and without coordination, vehicles now pose a challenge to the grid and induce stress where it's really not needed. And so I think that communication really plays a big role in there, in making sure that those two large industries can talk to each other and leverage each other to achieve a common objective.
Yeah, so I think this gets back to obviously, the cars talking to cars, there's a gigantic network effect, right? So if everyone has that technology, the benefits from the technology, obviously, as adoption increases, the benefits to those who have the technology gets better and better and better. So in a perfect world, the market would solve this problem, if there is a problem. That's, you know, we have a market economy. Traditionally, you know, we don't, in the federal government, we don't pick winners and losers, and when we've traditionally done a bad job of that. So, you know, again, the fact that now there isn't a car company, I know GM had this mini little sale, I think they sold a couple thousand of one model, but today, the only going forward commitment from an automaker is for Ford's commitment to deploy CV to X in 2022 in all their cars. So, you know, there's no one for, you can't, who are they supposed to be interoperable with? There isn't anyone yet. But, you know, what would be a huge mistake if a interoperability requirement were imposed. DSRC and CV to X are not interoperable. It's like cellular and Wi-Fi. You know, the two technologies have very fundamentally different techniques of communicating. So if we say there has to be an interoperability requirement, you know, does DSRC have to change itself and become CV to X? Does CV to X have to change itself and become DSRC? It really doesn't make a lot of sense. So, you know, the way I foresee it is we have done 5GAA, all the companies who've been developing CV to X have put all of the test results out there. I agree with you, Cordell, better is in the eye of the beholder, but greater range, greater reliability, better congestion control. There's a whole series of benchmarks that DOT has come up with, not Qualcomm or anyone else, and on all of those agreed upon industry benchmarks, the CV to X radio has outperformed DSRC.
I don't think that's all
Okay,
true.
well, just let me finish.
But you've been repeating this over and over again, Dean. So I think the point is we've got 3 pilots: New York City, Tampa, Wyoming, where we'll finally get to see DSRC, connected vehicle to infrastructure. We even have an application for infrastructure to vision impaired pedestrians. So we're able to leverage this technology in a way that it hasn't been done before. And I think before anyone says congestion management will be better, we probably, of all the big cities, have the only network of every single traffic signal able to be networked. We're rolling out a new carrier-based network, wirelessly connecting 14,000 endpoints, including all of our traffic signals. So the pilot that we're doing is built upon that network of communicating and traffic management, and we'll be able to see in an open way, reporting the data to USDOT, USDOT making the data available in a public portal to just how well this technology performs.
Okay, so now if I could finish. So it's sad. It's actually fundamentally sad if DSRC's been around since 1999, but oh no, the first actual tests of its capabilities are in 2019. Come on, what's happened between 1999 and 2019? That's why there is a revisiting going on. But put that aside, forget it. Look, here's the point. The government shouldn't make a decision what the best technology is. Europe did that in 2G. They picked GSM. It turned out to be a huge mistake. They had to make a gigantic change in 3G. The United States has a track record when we haven't picked a technology, when we've let the government, when we've let the market decide the best technology has gotten deployed.
So I'll come back to the question I gave you earlier. To what extent are you going to prioritize safety of the driving public? That's the question. If you put a really high priority on it, you've heard that the 2 radio technologies are not interoperable, and you've heard Dean articulate that we should let market forces decide which technology will become the one that we all use. But if safety is your top priority, then you would look to make a decision to accelerate one or the other, right? I think that we missed an opportunity with our friends at NHTSA when they failed to mandate DSRC in the wake of their notice of proposed rulemaking a few years ago. We desperately now, I think, as a community, need to figure out whether the question of safety is continues to be our highest priority. It's certainly not a high priority for some members of the communications sector, right? They're advocating we eliminate the ITS spectrum band altogether. And do we need dedicated spectrum to do it on? And those are really the 2 questions I come back to today.